markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Asian shares mostly fall Monday amid confusion after U.S. officials hint at a delay in tariff changes but give few details. The U.S. is close to finalizing several trade agreements and plans to notify other countries about higher tariff rates by July 9. President Donald Trump says the increased tariffs will take effect in August. However, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent denies that August 1 is a firm deadline for negotiations, warning that U.S. trading partners could face a return to the original April 2 tariff levels. Japan's Nikkei 225, Hong Kong's Hang Seng, China's Shanghai Composite, and Australia's ASX 200 are in the red, while South Korea's Kospi and Singapore's Straits Times are in the green. In the currency markets, the U.S. dollar appreciates against the Japanese yen, Singapore dollar, South Korean won, and the Thai baht. The Australian dollar also appreciates against the greenback, but the U.S. dollar is flat with a slight uptick against the Hong Kong dollar. In commodities and crypto, gold prices fall by 0.7%. Oil markets also fall across the board as OPEC Plus opened the supply spigots more than expected. In the cryptocurrency space, both Bitcoin and Ethereum are in positive territory. The U.S. will start delivering tariff letters to other countries starting Monday. In a social media post, President Trump also said countries aligning themselves with the anti-American policies of BRICS nations will be charged an additional 10% tariff. The group is composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It is seen as an attempt to counterbalance the influence of Western institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Other countries have joined BRICS, including Iran, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia, among others. U.S. President Donald Trump always chickens out. That's according to Dino Aquino, Vice President and Head of Fixed Income at Security Bank. In an interview with Business 360, Aquino said Trump's tariff threats may not be a cause for concern, as he usually backs down. This happened with Canada and Mexico and the supposed 145% tariff on Chinese exports. Taco has become a widely used term in criticizing the president.
There's a lot of noise.
Right? Yeah.
There's a lot of noise going on in the U.S., but on our case...
And it wasn't like that in the past. Not to this extent.
Yeah, not to this extent.
Which is why it's causing this big rethink in strategy.
The Trump 2.0 is more volatile than Trump the first term, so it's creating a lot of chaos.
House Speaker Martin Romualdez seeking to reform the national budgeting system. Romualdez filed House Bill 11, or the Budget Modernization Act, which proposes a shift to a cash-based system. He says the proposal targets to eliminate delays, unused funds, and wasteful spending, and to ensure that government projects are completed within the same fiscal year. Romualdez also pushes for performance-based budgeting, where agencies are measured by results and not just spending. President Bongbong Marcos led the grand launch of the National Fiber Backbone Phases 2 and 3 in Leyte on Monday. This is aimed at providing faster and more reliable internet connectivity across the country. It will expand the NFB by an additional 1,781 kilometers of fiber optic cables in Cagayan Valley, Calabarzon, Bicol, Eastern Visayas, and Mindanao, thus extending internet access to more than 600 government institutions and public spaces. Around 17 million Filipinos are expected to benefit from the project. Phase 1 was launched last year from Lawag, Ilocos Norte to Quezon City. The new Makati City Administration has uncovered a last-minute settlement agreement between the Makati subway contractor and the city's previous administration worth nearly 9 billion pesos. The agreement obligates the city government to pay the amount within 90 days from the issuance of a consent award by the Singapore International Arbitration Center. Mayor Nancy Binay said they cannot pay the amount, and the agreement will deal a blow to the city's financial health. She also cries foul over the settlement made during the term of her sister, Abby, since no public consultation was made. The settlement also imposes an additional 1.7 billion pesos in penalties if the city fails to meet the 90-day deadline. Mayor Nancy assured Makati constituents that all legal remedies are being exhausted to mitigate the damage and hold responsible those accountable. Aboitiz Power bags the bid for the Caliraya, Botocan, Kalayaan plants in Laguna as a third part of the Thunder Consortium with Sumitomo and Electric Power Development. The deal for the 796-megawatt hydro plants boosts its renewable energy mix and solidifies its lead as the country's top hydropower player. The group's 36 billion peso bid is nearly double the 19.6 billion offer of its only rival. Analysts see strong long-term earnings potential but flag challenges in upgrading the decades-old CBK complex and competing against newer plants. For millions of workers, a decent wage remains out of reach. And with President Bongbong Marcos set to deliver his SONA, they're calling for action and not promises. This special report from George Cahiles.
Alvin Cerda, a daily wage earner from Quezon City, buys just 2 kilos of rice. At 45 pesos per kilo, it's just enough to feed his family for the day.
Yung quality na binibili ko, yung pa rin, pero madadagdagan pa. Kasi 2 kilos ng 2 kilos lang ako eh. Kasi sa ngayon, wala akong trabaho ngayon, mga next week pa, sa July pa. Kaya mas maganda, kung matutuloy yun na sinasabi na aumento na tataas nga, mas maganda yun.
Workers had pinned their hopes on a legislated wage hike. It's 200 peso daily wage hike in the House version and 100 pesos in the Senate version. But the proposal didn't make it to the president's desk. A bicameral conference was not convened before the 19th Congress adjourned. The business sector had also expressed opposition. Even President Marcos appeared unconvinced. In his last SONA, he pointed to wage increases already issued by regional wage boards.
With tripartite consensus, minimum wage levels have been increased in various sectors in all regions, including the BARM, for workers and private establishments. Makakapagdulot ito ng ginhawa sa mahigit 4 na milyong mga kababayan na natin at ng kanilang mga pamilya.
But for labor leader Luque Espiritu of Bukluran ng Manggagawang Pilipino, President Marcos has shown little concern for workers' struggles.
Hindi niya inangat ang buhay ng masang Pilipino. And ito na sana ang opportunity ni Bongbong Marcos to show na meron naman siyang binibigay na relief sa krisis na nararamdaman ng masang Pilipino. And he failed the challenge.
In the Philippines, if only one family member earns minimum wage and supports a family of 5, that family is still considered poor, based on the government's own poverty threshold. For example, in the NCR, where the daily minimum wage is 695 pesos, a worker earns around 15,290 pesos per month. That's 423 pesos lower than the region's poverty threshold. But the gap is even more pronounced in the regions, like in Bicol, where the difference between the monthly minimum wage and the poverty threshold reaches nearly 5,000 pesos. Think tank Ibon Foundation says the living wage gap remains wide, a national daily shortfall of 742 pesos as of May 2025. Even with a slight improvement, half of Filipinos still consider themselves poor, according to the survey of SWS.
Dito sa Pilipinas, hindi. Maging manggagawa ka lang, bagsak ka sa below the poverty line. So, hindi matatapos ang demand for livable wages. Always demand namin na dapat i-certify niya as urgent ang wage bill. Tapos pagkatapos niya i-certify as urgent ang wage bill, pirmahan niya.
Muli pag-aaralan ito kung kakayanin ba talaga. Kasi kung magdudulot naman ito ng layoff dahil hindi kakayanin ng karamihang maliliit na mga negosyante, mas marami pong mahihirapang mga manggagawa dahil baka mawalan sila ng trabaho. Kaya po lahat ng ito ay pag-aaralan para sa ikabubuti po ng lahat.
With the opening of the 20th Congress, some lawmakers have promised to refile the wage hike bill. But will Congress leaders act on it immediately? Will President Marcos change his position before leaving office? Or will higher wages remain just a dream as millions of workers continue to struggle with hunger and hardship? George Cahiles, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Del Monte Pacific Limited of Bilyonaryo Butch Campos may incur losses worth 42 billion pesos. This after its U.S. subsidiary filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. In a disclosure to the Singapore Exchange, Del Monte Pacific said the write-down will include its $579 million in equity investment in its U.S. unit, as well as $169 million in receivables as of January 21 this year. Despite the impending losses, Campos is unfazed, citing Del Monte's strong performance in its Asian businesses, particularly Del Monte Philippines Incorporated, which delivered a $226 million positive cash flow in fiscal year 2025. Campos also assures investors that the impact of the bankruptcy is largely contained within its U.S. operations. We're taking a short break. More business stories are up next. You're watching Business Brief. Filipinos now carry the highest credit card debt in the ASEAN, with the average credit card holder owing 4 times his monthly income. What are card holders spending on? Sujin Kim has this report. Go ahead, Sujin.
Mai, a new report from Singapore-based fintech firm Roshi Pte Limited is sounding the alarm on credit card debt in the Philippines, describing it as having reached critical risk levels. Based on their regional comparison, the average Filipino cardholder now owes 425% of their monthly income, the highest ratio among 12 countries in the region, including Indonesia with 338% and Malaysia with 262%. This means that a person earning 20,000 pesos a month could be carrying as much as 85,000 pesos or more in credit card balance, with interest accruing month after month. Dr. Sir Peña Reyes, an economist and former banker, calls the findings concerning, noting that such debt levels may be beyond most Filipinos' capacity to repay through regular income alone.
4 times what you earn in a month is quite big. I don't know how people will be able to manage that.
He says consumers will either need to find additional income sources or drastically cut back on spending, a scenario that could have wider macroeconomic consequences. And unlike other types of loans which are tied to productive assets, most credit card debt, he says, is driven purely by consumption. Increasingly, credit cards are also being used for basic necessities, which may indicate deeper pressures on household budgets.
Things that come, every month, that you'll have to pay, which means to say, there might be an impact. Let's say, inflation is becoming a problem when things are getting more expensive. Very hard to manage your finances and pay off things that regularly are billed to you. Being forced to borrow to pay for utilities, or your monthly cell phone bill, phone bill, electricity.
Latest data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas shows that non-performing loans rose to a 5-month high in April, hitting 3.57%. And for economist Emmanuel Leyte, the Roshi report may have missed a crucial part of the Philippine economic puzzle: remittances. Leyte argues that the $3 to $4 billion in monthly OFW remittances significantly augment household spending power and are likely being used to pay off credit card balances as well.
Right now, to sound off an alarm that we are at a critical level, I think that is not timely. But at the same time, that could be a good basis to educate the Filipino borrowers not to exceed your borrowing capacity on a monthly basis.
Still, Leyte warns that financial education remains a gap, particularly among first-time or low-income cardholders. Meanwhile, lenders set aside close to ₱500 billion as allowance for credit losses, with an NPL coverage ratio of 95.10%, slightly higher than the month before. And those are latest updates from Quezon City. Back to you, Mai.
Thank you for that report, Sujin Kim. A U.S. federal judge has ruled that 38 Filipino construction workers can sue 2 American firms for forced labor in Qatar's 2022 World Cup stadium projects. The 2023 lawsuit accuses Jacobs Engineering and CH2M of abuse under U.S. anti-trafficking laws. The Filipinos claim that they were made to work long hours, forced to live in cramped quarters, and had their passports confiscated. Magistrate Judge Cyrus Chung's ruling sets a legal first for a U.S. court asserting jurisdiction over labor abuses committed abroad. President Bongbong Marcos says the 20 peso per kilo rice is here to stay, but for now it's strictly for the country's most vulnerable. The subsidized rice is being sold through Kadiwa stores and select public markets exclusively for indigents, senior citizens, solo parents, and persons with disabilities. Marcos stresses the program won't undercut local farmers thanks to the government's Benteng Bigas Meron Na initiative, which buys palay at fair prices. The National Food Authority is paying up to 23 pesos per kilo of palay, while also providing drying and milling support to raise farmers' income.
Sa pagtutulungan ng maraming ahensya ng national government at gayon in partnership with the local government, 20 peso rice is here to stay. It is achievable, it is sustainable. Kaya abangan ninyo in your nearest public market.
Pump prices will drop slightly this week starting Tuesday. In separate advisories, fuel retailers announced gasoline will go down by 70 centavos per liter, diesel by 10 centavos, and kerosene by 80 centavos. Oil markets stabilized after Iran and Israel agreed to a ceasefire, down to below $70 a barrel from a high of above $80 in June at the height of the conflict. U.S. President Donald Trump scoffs at billionaire Elon Musk's move to start a new political party. Trump says it's just ridiculous to have a third party.
We have a tremendous success with the Republican Party. The Democrats have lost their way, but it's always been a two-party system. And I think starting a third party just adds to confusion. It really seems to have been developed for two parties. Third parties have never worked.
The world's richest man and Trump's former buddy on Saturday announced he was forming the America Party, a fallout from his rift with the president over his One Big Beautiful Bill. Musk has repeatedly warned that Trump's tax and spending bill would bankrupt the U.S. Philippine Shares closed the first trading day of the week in positive territory. The PSE index ended higher by 0.4% to close at 64.25, finishing the day as the best performer in Asia. Majority of the sectoral indices ended in the green, with financials rising the most at 0.8%, but decliners outpaced advancers 100 to 96. Total value turnover reached 7.8 billion pesos. Majority of the day's most active stocks ended in the green, with DigiPlus rising the most at nearly 15%. This is a 180-degree turn from last week's fall of nearly 10% amid panic selling across the market. Investor sentiment in the Tangko-led firm last week was also driven by concerns about potential regulatory actions in the gaming sector. Meanwhile, the foreign exchange market, the peso, is currently trading at 56.57 against the greenback, depreciating from the previous close of 56.40. that's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business, only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. See you then.